I still remember the exact moment my daughter looked at me on Christmas Eve and decided I no longer mattered. The living room was warm, filled with soft lights and the scent of pine, but when I handed Emily the small, carefully wrapped box, everything seemed to go cold. She didn't even touch it. Not once. "I don't want anything from you anymore, Mom." Her words landed harder than anything I had ever heard in my 68 years. Daniel stood beside her, silent but satisfied, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. She had no idea that the gift sitting untouched on that table wasn't just a present. It was the key to her entire future, and she had just refused it. If this moment made you feel something, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been hurt by someone you love without them even realizing it? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment, and if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing these moments together. There was a time when Emily wouldn't have let a single Christmas pass without calling me at least 3 times before noon. She used to wake up early, even as an adult, just to ask me how long to bake the cinnamon rolls or whether she should use the red tablecloth or the white one. She used to laugh when she called, her voice soft and warm, like she had never quite grown out of being my little girl. I held on to those memories longer than I probably should have. After her father passed away, it had been just the 2 of us. Emily was 12 at the time, old enough to understand that something had changed forever, but still young enough to reach for my hand in the middle of the night when the grief felt too big for her small heart. I remember those nights. I would sit at the edge of her bed, brushing her hair back, whispering the same promise over and over again. "It's just us now, sweetheart, but we're going to be okay." And for a long time, we were. I worked double shifts at the hospital billing office, sometimes picking up weekend work just to make sure she never felt the absence of anything. I missed school events, yes, but I never missed the important ones. Her first choir solo, her high school graduation, the day she got accepted into college. God, the way she cried that day. She had wrapped her arms around me so tightly, laughing through tears, saying, "We did it, Mom! We actually did it! Not I did it! We." That word used to mean everything, but somewhere along the way, it disappeared. And I know exactly when things began to change. It was about 6 years ago when Emily first mentioned a man named Daniel Carter. At first, she sounded happy. Genuinely happy. "He's different, Mom," she told me one evening over the phone. "He's confident. He knows what he wants, and he really listens to me." I remember smiling as I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone tucked between my shoulder and ear. "That's a good thing," I said. "You deserve someone who listens." And at the time, I meant it. When I first met Daniel, he was everything a mother would hope for on the surface. Well-dressed, polite, successful. He worked in corporate consulting, always talking about strategy and growth and long-term positioning. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and called me Mrs. Gallagher with just the right amount of respect. But there was something else. Something subtle. The way he answered questions for Emily before she could speak. The way his hand rested on her back, not gently but firmly, like a quiet reminder of where she belonged. I noticed it, but I told myself I was imagining things. Because Emily looked happy. At least in the beginning. The first year they were together, she still called me every Sunday. She still came over for dinner, still asked for recipes, still told me little details about her life. But slowly, those calls became shorter, then less frequent, then almost non-existent. "Sorry, Mom, it's been busy. We've just had a lot going on. Daniel and I are traveling this weekend." At first, I didn't think much of it. Life gets busy, relationships take time. But then something else changed. Her tone. There was a distance in her voice I couldn't quite explain. like she was speaking to me out of obligation, not affection. Like I had become someone she needed to manage rather than someone she wanted to talk to. The first time it truly unsettled me was during a visit about 3 years ago. I had driven down to see her new house. It was beautiful, bigger than anything I had ever owned. Clean lines, expensive furniture, everything perfectly arranged like a page out of a magazine. But it didn't feel like Emily. It felt curated. Daniel greeted me at the door smiling, but there was something tight in it. "Felicia," he said, stepping aside. "Welcome." Not Mom, not even Mrs. Gallagher this time, just Felicia. I noticed the change immediately. Inside, Emily hugged me, but it was quick, light, not the kind of hug that lingered. We sat down for dinner, and I tried to keep the conversation easy. I asked about her work, her friends, her plans. She answered, but every time she began to elaborate, Daniel would jump in. "She's been focusing more on our investments lately. We're thinking of shifting her career path. I've been advising her on better opportunities." Each time, Emily would go quiet, nodding along, as if his words were her own. I remember looking at her, really looking, and for the first time, I didn't quite recognize the woman sitting across from me. Later that evening, when Daniel stepped out to take a call, I tried to reach her. "Emily," I said softly, "are you happy?" She blinked, almost startled by the question. "Of course I am," she replied quickly, too quickly. I reached for her hand. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. But then it was gone. She pulled her hand back gently and gave me a small smile. "Mom, you worry too much." And just like that, the door closed again. After that visit, things changed faster. Calls became texts. Texts became silence. When I invited her over, she was always busy. When I suggested meeting for coffee, she had other plans. And when we did speak, it was always brief, always careful, like she was measuring every word. I tried to tell myself it was normal, that this was what happened when children grew up and built their own lives. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't distance. This was something else. Something deliberate. And then came the holidays. The first Christmas she didn't come home, I sat at the table alone, staring at 2 empty chairs. The second Christmas, she sent a card. No call. No visit. By the third Christmas, I had stopped expecting anything at all. Until this year. This year, she invited me. Just a small dinner, she said over the phone. Nothing big. Her voice was polite, controlled. But it was an invitation, and I held on to that like it was a lifeline, because somewhere deep inside me, I still believed the same thing I had whispered to her all those years ago. It's just us now. We're going to be okay. I just didn't realize how far she had already drifted, or how much someone else had pulled her away from me. By the time Christmas dinner actually began, I already knew this wasn't going to be the kind of evening I had hoped for. Still, I tried. I always try. Emily's dining room looked like something out of a magazine spread. A long oak table set with matching white plates, gold-rimmed glasses, folded linen napkins placed just so. A centerpiece of evergreen branches and candles ran down the middle, flickering softly in the dim light. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel warm. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded neatly in my lap as I watched Emily move back and forth between the kitchen and dining room. She didn't ask if I needed anything. She didn't smile the way she used to when she caught my eye. She just moved, efficient, controlled. almost like she was performing a role. Daniel, on the other hand, was perfectly at ease. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the backrest, a glass of red wine in his hand. He looked around the room like everything in it belonged to him, including my daughter. "So, Felicia," he said, swirling his wine slowly. "Emily tells me you used to work in billing." There was something in the way he said, "used to." I nodded politely. "Yes, hospital billing for over 30 years. He gave a short chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "That must have been routine." Routine. I felt the words settle between us, heavy and deliberate. "It was steady," I replied calmly. "It provided for my family." He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I suppose not everyone is meant for something more dynamic." Emily didn't say anything. Not a word. I turned my head slightly, hoping, just hoping, she might glance at me, might offer some small sign that she noticed what he was doing. But she kept her eyes on her plate as she placed the roasted chicken in the center of the table. "Dinner's ready," she said quietly. We began to eat. For a few minutes, the only sound was the soft clink of silverware against porcelain. I tried to keep my focus on the food, even though I could barely taste it. "Emily's been making some important changes lately," Daniel continued, as if picking up a conversation only he had been having. "I've been encouraging her to think bigger, to move beyond. Emily's been making some important changes lately," Daniel continued, as if picking up a conversation only he had been having. "I've been encouraging her to think bigger, to move beyond small thinking." I swallowed slowly, setting my fork down. "What kind of changes?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Before Emily could answer, Daniel spoke again. "We're restructuring her career path. There's no reason for her to stay stuck where she is when she has access to better opportunities." Emily nodded faintly. "Daniel's been helping me look at new options." Helping. The word lingered in my mind. I forced a small smile. "That's good, as long as it's what you want, Emily." She hesitated. Just for a second. And in that second, I saw it again. That flicker. But then Daniel leaned forward slightly, placing his hand over hers. "It is what she wants," he said smoothly. "Isn't it?" Emily's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Yes," she said. "Of course." I felt something tighten in my chest. I picked up my glass of water, taking a slow sip, just to give myself a moment to breathe. "Have you been able to see your friends much?" I asked, trying to shift the conversation. "I remember you mentioned Rachel last year." Daniel's expression changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. Emily glanced at him before answering. "Not really," she said. "We've both been busy." "I see," I murmured. Daniel set his glass down with a soft click. "Felicia," he said, his tone still polite but carrying a sharp edge. "Now, Emily doesn't really have time for distractions these days. We're focused on building something meaningful." "Friendships aren't distractions," I replied gently. "They can be," he said without hesitation. "Especially when they keep you tied to outdated perspectives." Outdated. There it was again. This time I didn't respond immediately. I looked at Emily, really looked at her. She was staring down at her plate again, her fork unmoving in her hand. "Emily," I said softly, "do you remember when you and Rachel used to spend entire weekends planning your futures? You had so many ideas." A faint smile touched her lips, almost involuntary. "We were kids, Mom," she said quietly. "Dreams don't stop mattering just because we grow older," I replied. Daniel let out a short laugh. "Dreams are fine," he said, "but they need to be realistic, structured, not sentimental." Something inside me shifted then. Not anger, not yet, but something close. I believe I said carefully that people need both structure and heart. One without the other rarely leads to anything good. Daniel leaned forward, his gaze locking onto mine. With respect, Felicia, he said. Though there was very little respect in his tone, that kind of thinking is exactly what keeps people from moving forward. The table fell silent. The candles flickered between us. For a moment I considered letting it go, just swallowing my words the way I had so many times before. But then I felt it again. That quiet, steady voice inside me. The same one that had carried me through years of raising Emily alone. The same one that refused to let me disappear. I moved forward just fine, I said softly. I raised a daughter who used to believe in herself. Emily's head snapped up. Mom! Daniel's hand tightened slightly on hers. I think we're done discussing this, he said firmly. And just like that, the conversation ended. Not naturally, not peacefully, ended. The rest of the dinner passed in strained silence. Emily cleared the plates quickly, avoiding eye contact. Daniel checked his phone more than once, as if he had more important places to be. And I sat there feeling like a guest in a life I had once been at the center of. After a while, Emily returned with dessert. Apple pie store-bought, though she didn't mention it. She placed a slice in front of me without a word. Thank you, I said gently. She nodded but didn't sit down. Instead, she remained standing near the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed loosely in front of her. Like she was waiting for something, or avoiding something. And that's when I realized we were getting close to the moment I had been preparing for, the moment I had spent months thinking about. The small, carefully wrapped box still sat beneath the tree in the living room, waiting. I looked at Emily, at the distance in her eyes, at the tension in her posture, and for the first time that evening, a quiet doubt crept into my mind. What if I was wrong? What if this gift, this thing I had believed would bring us back together, only pushed her further away? I folded my hands again, steadying myself, because deep down I knew one thing for certain. That box wasn't just a gift, it was a chance, and chances don't come twice. The box sitting under Emily's Christmas tree looked small, almost insignificant really. If you had walked into that living room without knowing anything about it, you might have assumed it was a pair of gloves or maybe a piece of jewelry. Something simple, something ordinary. But there was nothing ordinary about what I had placed inside. I had spent months preparing that gift. Months of careful planning, quiet conversations, and decisions that I never imagined I would have to make alone. And now, sitting there at the edge of her dining table, listening to the distant hum of the refrigerator and the faint crackle of the fireplace, I could feel the weight of all that time pressing down on me. Emily still hadn't moved toward the tree. She lingered near this kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her body angled slightly away from me, as if even standing too close felt uncomfortable. Daniel had returned to his seat, scrolling through something on his phone, though I had the distinct feeling he was paying far more attention than he let on. I cleared my throat gently. I actually brought something for you, Emily. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She didn't respond immediately. For a moment, I thought she might pretend she hadn't heard me at all. Then she sighed softly. You didn't have to, Mom. The words weren't harsh, but they weren't warm either. I know, I said, but I wanted to. Daniel let out a faint chuckle without looking up. Felicia, he said casually, we really weren't expecting gifts this year. We've been trying to keep things minimal, as if affection could be measured and reduced like a line item in a budget. I folded my hands together, keeping my gaze on Emily. It's not about expectations, I said gently. It's just something I felt was important. That caught her attention. Her eyes flickered toward mine just for a moment. Important, she repeated. I nodded. Yes. The silence that followed felt heavy, delicate, like one wrong word could shatter whatever fragile thread still connected us. Daniel finally set his phone down and leaned forward slightly. Well, he said, his tone smooth but edged. If it's something important, I'm sure Emily can take a look at it later. Later. A simple word, but it landed like a door closing. I shook my head softly. I'd rather she see it now. Emily shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. Mom, it's really not a big deal, she said quickly. It is. I interrupted more firmly than I intended. Both of them looked at me. I rarely interrupted, rarely insisted, but tonight, something in me refused to let this moment slip away. I wouldn't have brought it if it wasn't. I added softer now. Emily hesitated. I could see the conflict in her eyes again, the same flicker I had noticed earlier. But before she could speak, Daniel reached for his glass again. You know, he said almost lightly, sometimes holding on to things from the past can keep people from moving forward. I turned to him slowly. This isn't about the past, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? No, I replied. It's about her future. That word lingered in the air. Future. For the first time that evening, Emily's posture changed. Just slightly. Her arms loosened her shoulders, dropping a fraction. What do you mean? She asked. I took a slow breath. This was the moment, or at least the beginning of it. I started putting this together about 8 months ago, I said. It's something I've been working on with Mr. Klein and with Rachel. At the mention of Rachel, Gwen Daniels' expression hardened instantly. Emily's eyes widened just a little. Rachel, she repeated. Yes, I said gently. She's been helping me manage a few things. Daniel leaned back in his chair again, crossing his arms now. I thought we already established that Rachel wasn't exactly relevant to your current direction, he said. I didn't realize my direction needed approval, Emily murmured under her breath. The words were quiet, but they were there, and I heard them. Daniel heard them too. His gaze snapped toward her. What was that? He asked. Emily shook her head quickly. Nothing, but something had shifted, even if only a fraction. I held on to that small change like it mattered, because it did. It's just paperwork. I continued carefully. And a few documents that I thought you should have. Documents? Daniel repeated, his tone sharpening. Yes. He leaned forward again, his eyes narrowing slightly. What kind of documents? I met his gaze evenly. The kind that belonged to Emily. The room went still, completely still. I could hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. Daniel's jaw tightened. And why? He asked slowly. Would something like that need to come from you? Emily looked between us, confusion beginning to replace her earlier distance. Mom, what is this? She asked. I turned back to her. It's something I've been setting aside for you, I said softly. For a long time. Daniel let out a sharp exhale. Felicia, with all due respect, if this is about money or some kind of financial arrangement, it's not about you, I said more firmly this time. The words surprised even me, but once they were out, I didn't take them back. It's about her. Daniel's expression darkened. I'm her husband, he said. That makes it my business. I held his gaze for a moment. Then I shook my head. No, I said quietly. It doesn't. The silence that followed felt different this time. Heavier, more dangerous. Emily stepped forward slightly, her voice trembling just enough to betray the tension she was trying to hide. Mom, what's in the box? I looked at her, really looked at her. At the uncertainty, the curiosity, the faint crack in the wall she had built between us. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't just about the gift anymore. This was about whether she was willing to see me again, not as an obligation, not as a problem, but as her mother. It's something I should have given you a long time ago, I said. Daniel pushed his chair back abruptly, the legs scraping against the floor. I think we've entertained this enough, he said. Emily, you don't need to get pulled into... I want to know, she said suddenly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, and for the first time that night, it wasn't directed by him. It was hers. Daniel stared at her clearly, caught off guard. Emily took a small step toward the living room, toward the tree, toward the box, and as I watched her move, my heart began to pound in my chest, because I knew exactly what sat inside that carefully wrapped package. I knew what it could change, what it could reveal, what it might cost. And as her hand slowly reached toward it, I realized something else. Once she opened that box, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Emily's hand hovered over the box for a moment longer than I expected, not touching it, not pulling away either, just suspended there like she was standing at the edge of something she didn't fully understand. Emily, Daniel said quietly, but there was a warning beneath his calm tone. You don't have to do this right now. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the small package beneath the tree. I just want to see what it is, she said. There was something different in her voice now. Not defiant, not yet, but not entirely obedient either. It was the kind of voice I hadn't heard from her in years. Her own. I stayed where I was, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from trembling. This was her moment, not mine. Slowly, carefully, Emily bent down and picked up the box. It looked even smaller in her hands, so light, so unassuming, and yet I knew exactly how much weight it carried. She turned it over once as if trying to guess what was inside. There's no label, she murmured. I didn't think you needed one, I said softly. Daniel stood up, then crossing the distance between them in just a few steps. Emily, he said, placing his hand gently, but firmly, on her arm. We can go through it later, privately. Privately. The word hung in the air like a claim, like ownership. Emily's fingers tightened slightly around the box. It's just a gift, she said. Why does it matter when I open it? It matters, Daniel replied, his voice still calm, but now unmistakably controlled, because we don't know what it is, and we don't make decisions impulsively. Decisions, not curiosity, not connection. Decisions. I could see the tension building in her shoulders again, the familiar pattern, his words guiding her, shaping her, shrinking her. And then something happened that I hadn't seen in a very long time. Emily pulled her arm gently out of his grasp. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't forceful, but it was deliberate. I'm just opening a box, Daniel, she said. He didn't respond immediately, but I saw it. The flash of irritation in his eyes, the crack in the control he usually carried so effortlessly. Fine, he said after a moment. Go ahead. She didn't look at him again. Instead, she turned slightly and sat down on the edge of the couch, the box resting in her lap. I could feel my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. "Do you want me to open it?" she asked, glancing up at me. There was a softness in her expression now, uncertainty, a question she wasn't quite ready to ask out loud. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." She nodded. Then carefully she began to peel back the wrapping paper. The sound was soft, almost fragile, like something breaking open. Daniel remained standing behind her, arms crossed now, watching every movement with sharp attention. I kept my eyes on Emily, on her hands, on the way they slowed as she reached the inner box. A simple, plain box. No decorations, no indication of what it contained. She lifted the lid, and for a moment, she didn't react at all, just stared. "What is it?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached inside and pulled out a thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed, her name written across the front in my handwriting. "Mom," she whispered. I felt my throat tighten. "Go ahead," I said. She broke the seal slowly, carefully, like she was afraid of what she might find inside. As she pulled out the contents, a few sheets of paper slid into her lap. Legal documents. Official. Precise. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the first page. "What is this?" she asked. Daniel leaned in, trying to get a better look. Emily instinctively shifted the papers slightly away from him. A small movement, but it didn't go unnoticed. "It's something I've been holding on to for you," I said. She flipped to the next page, then the next. Her breathing changed. I could see it in the way her chest rose a little faster, in the way her fingers tightened around the edges of the paper. "This says ownership," she said, her voice trembling now. "Mom, what is this?" I took a slow breath. "This is a portion of a company," I said, "one that's been growing for several years now." She looked up at me, confusion and disbelief mixing in her eyes. "In my name?" she asked. "Yes." Daniel stepped forward again. "Let me see that," he said sharply. Emily hesitated. Then, for the first time that night, she didn't hand it over immediately. "I want to understand it first," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Emily, it's mine, isn't it?" she said, her voice gaining strength. The question hung in the air. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, "it is." She looked back down at the documents. "Mom, how is this even possible?" I folded my hands together again, grounding myself. "Do you remember Rachel Nguyen?" I asked gently. Her eyes flickered again. "Yes," she said. "Of course I do. She and I stayed in touch." I continued. "A few years ago, she approached me with an opportunity. A small startup at the time. It had potential, but it needed early investment." Emily listened, her expression shifting with every word. "I didn't have much," I said, "but I had enough to take a chance. So I did." Daniel scoffed quietly. "And you're saying this somehow turned into something substantial?" he asked. I didn't look at him. I kept my focus on Emily. "It grew," I said simply. "Slowly at first, then faster than anyone expected." Emily's eyes moved across the pages again. "There are shares listed here," she whispered. "A lot of them." "Yes." "But why is it in my name?" she asked, because that was the part she didn't understand yet, the part that mattered most. I felt my chest tighten as I prepared to answer. Because I said softly, "It was always meant to be yours." The room fell completely silent. Emily stared at me, her eyes wide now. "What do you mean?" she asked. I swallowed. "This wasn't just an investment," I said. It was something I built for you, for your future. Daniel let out a sharp breath. This is ridiculous, he muttered. You expect her to believe that you just handed over something like this without telling her I didn't tell her? I said calmly, because I wanted her to have it when she needed it. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Needed it for what? I held her gaze. For the day you realized I said that you deserved a life that belonged to you. The words hung between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. And as Emily looked down at the documents again, something changed in her expression. Not just confusion anymore. Not just disbelief. But something deeper. Something that had been buried for a long time. The silence that followed my words didn't feel empty. It felt charged, like something had been set in motion that none of us could stop anymore. Emily kept staring at the documents in her lap, her fingers tracing the edges of the pages as if touching them might somehow make sense of what she was seeing. A life that belongs to me, she repeated softly, almost to herself. Daniel stepped closer again, his patience clearly thinning. Emily, this is exactly what I was talking about, he said. This is emotional manipulation. She's presenting this now in the middle of a holiday dinner, without context, without planning. I gave her context, I said calmly. You just don't like what it means. He turned toward me, his expression tightening. What it means, he said, is that you're interfering in our life. Our life. The way he said it left no room for interpretation. I looked at Emily. She still hadn't looked up. She deserves to understand what's hers, I said quietly. Daniel let out a short, sharp laugh. And you think you get to decide that now, after years of silence, years of silence. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were entirely false, but because they ignored everything that had led to them. I didn't choose silence. I replied, my voice steady but firm. I respected the distance she created. That's convenient, he shot back. Emily's head lifted slightly. Stop, she said. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Daniel paused, clearly caught off guard. Emily took a slow breath, her eyes still on the papers. I just need a minute. Stop, she said. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Daniel paused clearly, caught off guard. Emily took a slow breath, her eyes still on the papers. I just need a minute, she said. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but something in her tone made him stop. For the first time that evening, he stepped back. Not far, but enough. And in that small space he left behind, something else had room to grow. Emily flipped through the documents again, more carefully this time. These dates, she murmured. This started years ago. Yes, I said. You invested when I was still in my last job, she continued. Before I even met Daniel. Yes. Her brow furrowed deeper. And you never told me? No. She looked up at me then. Really looked at me. Why? The question was simple, but it carried years of distance inside it. I held her gaze, choosing my words carefully. Because I didn't want it to define your choices, I said. I wanted you to build your own path, to know what you were capable of without relying on something I gave you. Emily's lips parted slightly like she hadn't expected that answer. And now she asked. Now, I said softly, I see that you might need it. Daniel stepped forward again, unable to hold back any longer. Need it for what he demanded. What exactly are you implying? I turned to him. I'm not implying anything. I said. I'm offering her something that belongs to her, and what comes with it, he pressed. Control conditions. Freedom, I said. The word landed differently this time. He stared at me clearly, unimpressed. Freedom from what he asked. I didn't answer him. I looked at Emily instead, because she already knew. I could see it in her eyes, the way they shifted, the way something inside her was beginning to question things she had accepted for years. Mom, she said slowly, how much is this worth? Daniel immediately leaned in again. That's not the point, he said quickly. The point is, it matters, she interrupted. Another first. Daniel froze. Emily's grip tightened slightly on the papers. I need to understand what this actually is, she continued. I nodded. You remember the company Rachel joined a few years back? I asked. The one she kept talking about. The one you said was too risky, she replied. Daniel's expression flickered again. I didn't say risky, he corrected. I said unstable. Emily ignored him. I gave a small nod. That's the one, I said. It's not unstable anymore. She looked back down at the documents. These numbers, she whispered, they're significant. Yes. How significant, she pressed. I hesitated for just a moment, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew what it would do, how it would shift everything even further. It's enough, I said carefully, to give you independence. Real independence. The word hung in the air. Independence? Daniel's react-ion was immediate. This is ridiculous. It's enough, I said carefully, to give you independence. Real independence. The word hung in the air. Independence. Daniel's reaction was immediate. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're throwing numbers around without context. Emily, you don't even know if this is legitimate. It is, I said, and how do we verify that he shot back? You can call Mr. Howard Klein, I replied calmly. His number is in the documents. He handled everything legally. Emily flipped through the pages again, her fingers moving faster now. I see his name, she said. And Rachel's. She paused, her eyes stopping on something. What is this clause? She asked, her voice tightening slightly. I leaned forward just a little. It ensures that the shares remain solely under your control, I explained. No one else can access them or make decisions about them without your consent. The room went still again, but this time, it felt sharper. Daniel's entire posture changed. What? He said. Emily looked up slowly. It says the ownership is exclusively mine, she said. No joinees exclusively mine, she said. No joint control, no shared authority. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's absurd, he said. We're married. That kind of arrangement is legal, I said quietly. And intentional. His eyes locked onto mine. Intentional T-control. No shared authority. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's absurd, he said. We're married. That kind of arrangement is legal, I said quietly. And intentional. His eyes locked onto mine. Intentional, he repeated. Yes, meaning you set this up to exclude me. No, I said. I set it up to protect her. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. Daniel's calm facade cracked completely. Protect her from what? He demanded. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to, because Emily already had. Her voice was soft, barely audible, but it cut through everything. From losing herself, she said. Daniel turned toward her slowly. Excuse me. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes still fixed on the documents. I don't even recognize some of these decisions anymore, she continued. The career changes, the investments, they weren't really mine, were they? Daniel's expression hardened. Of course they were, he said. I guided you. That's what partners do. Guided. The words sounded different now. Less supportive. More controlling. Emily shook her head slightly. No, she said. Guiding isn't the same as deciding. The silence that followed was deafening, and as I sat there watching my daughter slowly piece things together, I realized something I hadn't dared to hope for before. This wasn't just about a gift anymore. This was about truth. And once the truth begins to surface, it doesn't go back into hiding. For a long moment after Emily spoke, no one moved. It was as if the entire room had shifted beneath our feet, but none of us quite knew how to stand again. Daniel was the first to recover. This is getting out of hand, he said. His voice no longer calm, no longer polished. There was an edge to it now, a sharpness that hadn't been fully visible before. Emily, you're overreacting to paperwork you don't even understand. Emily didn't look at him. She was still staring at the documents in her hands, but something about her posture had changed. She wasn't shrinking anymore. I understand enough, she said quietly. Daniel exhaled, clearly frustrated. No, you don't, he replied. You're letting this situation get emotional. That's exactly what your mother wants. The accusation hung in the air. I didn't respond. I had learned over many years that some people don't hear anything but their own certainty. Emily, however, did react. Slowly, she lifted her head and looked at him. What do you think she wants? She asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight. Daniel blinked just for a fraction of a second. Then he straightened, his tone shifting again, softer now. Persuasive. She wants to pull you back into her world, he said, into her way of thinking, her limitations. Then he straightened, his tone shifting again, softer now. Persuasive. She wants to pull you back into her world, he said, into her way of thinking, her limitations. Limitations. I felt the word, but I didn't interrupt. This wasn't my moment to speak. It was Emily's. And what is your world? Emily asked. Daniel smiled faintly, as if the answer was obvious. A future with structure, with direction, with growth, he said. Everything we've been building together. Emily's eyes dropped back to the papers. And this? She asked, holding them slightly higher. What is this, then? Daniel hesitated. For the first time, there was no immediate answer. It's an unexpected variable, he said finally. One that needs to be evaluated carefully. Evaluated. The word sounded clinical, detached, as if the life-changing reality sitting in her hands was nothing more than a spreadsheet. Emily let out a slow breath. I feel like I've been evaluating everything for years, she said. Every decision, every step. That's because we're being responsible, Daniel replied quickly. She shook her head slightly. No, she said. It feels like I've been asking for permission. The room went still again. Daniel's expression hardened. That's not fair, he said. Isn't it? She asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. And there was something else in it now. Something that hadn't been there earlier. Clarity. Daniel stepped closer, his tone dropping lower, more controlled. Emily, he said, you're tired. It's been a long day. You're overwhelmed. That's all this is. He reached out as if to take the papers from her hands. But this time, she pulled them back. No, she said. Just one word. But it echoed. Daniel froze. "You don't get to tell me what I'm feeling," she continued. There it was. The line. The one that had been invisible for so long, now suddenly clear. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm trying to help you," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's what you always say." "And it's true." "Maybe," she said. "But helping isn't supposed to feel like this." His jaw tightened. "And what exactly does this feel like?" he asked. Emily hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real. "Like him disappearing?" she said finally. The words settled heavily in the room. I felt my breath catch in my chest. Daniel stared at her, disbelief flashing across his face. "That's dramatic," he said. Emily gave a small, almost sad smile. "Is it?" she asked. She looked down at the documents again. "At least this feels like something I didn't lose," she added. Daniel let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. "This is exactly why I didn't want you opening this tonight," he said. "It's clouding your judgment. Or maybe it's clearing it," she replied. He laughed, but it was strained now. "Clearing it? Based on what? A surprise investment your mother kept hidden from you for years." Emily's grip tightened again. "She didn't hide it to control me," she said. "She just told me why." He laughed, but it was strained now. "Clearing it. Based on what? A surprise investment your mother kept hidden from you for years." Emily's grip tightened again. "She didn't hide it to control me," she said. "She just told me why." "And you believe that?" he challenged. She looked up at him. "Yes," she said simply. The certainty in her voice hit him harder than anything else she had said. I could see it. The moment he realized he was losing ground. "Emily," he said, his tone shifting again, softer, almost pleading. "Now we've built something together. You can't just let this derail everything." She stood slowly, the document still in her hands. "I'm not trying to derail anything," she said. "I'm trying to understand where I stand." "You stand with me," he said immediately. The response came too fast, too automatic, and for the first time, Emily noticed. She tilted her head slightly. "That's not really an answer," she said. Daniel's patience snapped. "What do you want me to say?" he demanded. "That you suddenly have financial independence now." "That changes everything, because it doesn't. We're married. We make decisions together." Emily's eyes moved to the clause again, the one that clearly stated otherwise. "This says I don't have to," she said quietly. The air in the room shifted instantly. Daniel's expression darkened. "That clause is irrelevant," he said sharply. "It's just legal wording." "It's not irrelevant to me," she replied. There was no hesitation now, no uncertainty, just truth. Daniel took a step closer, his voice dropping lower. "You're letting this get between us," he said. Emily shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I think it's showing me what's already there." The words landed harder than anything before, because they weren't emotional. They were clear. And clarity is difficult to argue with. Daniel stared at her, searching for something to say, something to regain control. But for once, there was nothing. And in that silence, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My daughter. Not the version shaped by someone else. Not the careful, measured voice that second-guessed every word. But the girl who used to stand beside me and say, "We did it, Mom." She wasn't fully back. Not yet. but she was closer than she had been in a very long time. And as she stood there, holding the future I had built for her, I realized something. I had almost given up, almost walked away, almost convinced myself that she was gone for good. But sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one truth, one choice, to begin finding your way back. Daniel didn't raise his voice right away. That would have been too obvious, too revealing. Instead, he took a slow breath, straightened his posture, and smoothed his expression into something calmer, something more controlled. The version of him that had likely convinced Emily of many things over the years. "Emily," he said, his tone soft again, measured. "We're not going to make any decisions tonight. That wouldn't be responsible." Emily didn't respond. She was still holding the documents, but now her grip had relaxed slightly. Not because she was letting go, but because she was thinking. "I'm not making a decision," she said after a moment. "I'm asking questions." "And that's fine," he replied quickly. "But questions need context, and right now, all you have is a partial story." He turned to me then. "And with all due respect, Felicia, you're presenting this in a very strategic way." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. People like Daniel always assumed that if something shifted out of their control, it had to be manipulation. "It's not strategy," I said quietly. "It's timing." His eyes narrowed slightly. Timing for what he asked. "For the moment, she's ready to see it," I replied. Emily's head tilted just slightly. Ready to see what she asked. I looked at her carefully. This was the next step, the one I had debated with myself for months. Because once I said it, there would be no going back. "You asked earlier why I said you might need this now," I said gently. She nodded. "Yes." I took a slow breath. "Because I've been watching," I said. Not closely enough to interfere, but enough to understand. Daniel let out a quiet, impatient exhale. "Here we go," he muttered. I ignored him. "I've seen the way you stopped calling your friends," I continued. "The way your career shifted in directions you never talked about before. The way you started questioning yourself instead of trusting your instincts." Emily's eyes flickered. Not denial. Recognition. "That's called growth," Daniel said sharply. "No," I said, still calm. "Growth doesn't erase who you are." Emily swallowed. Her finger, "Who you are." Emily swallowed. Her fingers tightened again around the papers. "I thought I was growing," she said slowly. "I thought I was becoming more focused." Daniel nodded immediately. "You are," he said. "That's exactly what we've been working toward." Tightened again around the papers. "I thought I was growing," she said slowly. "I thought I was becoming more focused." Daniel nodded immediately. "You are," he said. "That's exactly what we've been working toward." Emily turned her head slightly toward him. "But why does it feel like I've lost something?" she asked. The question hit harder than anything else she had said. Because it wasn't directed at him alone. It was directed at herself. Daniel hesitated. Just for a moment. Then he stepped closer again, lowering his voice. "Because change is uncomfortable," he said. "That's normal. You're stepping into a higher level of life. That requires letting go of things that don't serve you." Emily's gaze dropped. "Like my friends?" she asked. "If they're holding you back, yes. Like my old job?" "If it didn't align with your future, yes." She nodded slowly. "And my opinions, that one landed differently." Daniel didn't answer right away. "You've always had opinions," he said finally. "But have I been using them?" she asked. Silence, a quiet, uncomfortable silence. I could see it now. The cracks weren't small anymore. They were spreading. And once cracks appear, they don't disappear. Emily looked back at the documents. This says I have full control, she said softly. That I don't need approval to make decisions. That's just legal language, Daniel said quickly. It doesn't change reality. This says I have full control, she said softly. That I don't need approval to make decisions. That's just legal language, Daniel said quickly. It doesn't change reality. What is reality? She asked. He frowned. What do you mean, she said, her voice steadier now. What does my life look like if I actually make my own decisions? Daniel's expression darkened again. You are making your own decisions, he insisted. Emily shook her head. No, she said. I've been agreeing with yours. The truth sat between them, unavoidable now. Daniel's voice sharpened. That's not fair. Maybe not, she said, but it's honest. He ran a hand through his hair again, pacing a small step to the side. Emily, listen to me, he said. We've built a plan, a real plan. Everything we've done has been for your benefit. My benefit, she repeated. Yes. Then why don't I feel like it's mine? She asked. That was the question, the one that couldn't be redirected, the one that couldn't be softened or reframed. Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out, and in that moment something shifted again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. Emily stood up, the document still in her hands. I need some space, she said. Daniel's head snapped toward her. Space for what he asked. To think, she replied. You can think here, he said quickly. We can talk this through. No, she said, shaking her head. I can't think clearly when I feel like I'm being guided to a conclusion. Guided. The word came back. This time from her. Daniel's came back. This time from her. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm not guiding you, he said. She gave a small, tired smile. You are, she said. You just don't realize how much. He stepped closer again. Emily, I'm not leaving you, she said, cutting him off. I'm just jaw tightened. I'm not guiding you, he said. She gave a small, tired smile. You are, she said. You just don't realize how much. He stepped closer again. Emily, I'm not leaving you, she said, cutting him off. I'm just stepping back. The distinction mattered, and I could see that he knew it, because stepping back meant perspective, and perspective meant change. You're overcomplicating this, he said. Or maybe I've been oversimplifying it for too long, she replied. The room fell quiet again, but this silence felt different. Not tense, not heavy, just open. Emily turned to me then, her eyes softer now, more present. Mom, she said, can I take this with me? The question alone was everything, because she wasn't rejecting it anymore. She wasn't pushing it away. She was choosing to hold on to it. Yes, I said gently, it's yours. She nodded. Then slowly, she walked past Daniel. Not rushing, not hesitating, just moving. And as she passed him, he didn't reach out this time, didn't stop her, didn't speak. He just watched. Because for the first time, he didn't know how. The front door opened quietly, then closed. And just like that, the balance of everything had shifted. I remained seated for a moment, letting the silence settle. Daniel stood in the middle of the room, staring at the door like he could will it open again. Finally, he turned to me. "This isn't over," he said. I met his gaze calmly. "No," I replied, "it's just beginning." The house felt different after Emily left. Not quieter, not emptier, just exposed, like something had been pulled back that could never be covered again. Daniel didn't sit down. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't pretend everything was fine anymore. He stood in the middle of the room, staring at the door long after it had closed. I remained where I was, my hands resting calmly in my lap, even though my heart was still beating faster than I wanted to admit. "She'll be back," he said finally. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A certainty he was trying to hold on to. "Maybe," I replied. That wasn't the answer he wanted. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened. He turned to face me slowly. "You think you've done something good here?" he said. I met his gaze. "I think she needed to see the truth," I said. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "The truth," he repeated, "or your version of it." I didn't react, because arguing with him wasn't the point. Not anymore. "This isn't about me," I said quietly. "It never was." He took a step closer. "Everything about this is about you," he snapped. "You waited until now. You brought that box into this house knowing exactly what it would do." "Yes," I said. The honest why seemed to catch him off guard. "I did." "Everything about this is about you," he snapped. "You waited until now. You brought that box into this house knowing exactly what it would do." "Yes," I said. The honesty seemed to catch him off guard. "I did." His eyes narrowed. "So you admit it," he said. "I admit," I replied calmly that I chose the moment carefully. "Why now?" he demanded. I held his gaze. "Because she's finally questioning things I said. And once someone starts questioning, they deserve answers." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She doesn't need your answers," he said. "She has me." There it was again. That assumption, that certainty. I shook my head slowly. "She doesn't need anyone to speak for her," I said. He stepped closer again, his voice lowering, more intense now. "You don't understand what you've started," he said. I looked at him. "No," I replied. "I understand exactly what I've started." "And what is that?" he challenged. I didn't hesitate. "A choice?" The word lingered between us. Simple, but powerful. Daniel scoffed. "She already had a choice," he said. "She chose this life. She chose me." "Yes," I said. "She did." "Then what are you trying to prove?" "I'm not trying to prove anything," I replied. "I'm giving her the chance to choose again." That was the moment his control slipped completely. "You don't get to rewrite her life," he snapped. "I'm not rewriting it," I said. "I'm reminding her it belongs to her." The tension in the room rose instantly. Daniel ran a hand over his face, pacing a few steps away before turning back to me. "You think this money changes things?" he said. "You think giving her some financial independence suddenly makes you the hero?" "It's not about money," I said. "Then what is it about?" he demanded. "Trust," I replied. He stopped moving. "Trust," he repeated. "Yes." He laughed again, louder this time. "That's ironic," he said, "considering you kept this hidden from her for years." "I didn't hide it from her to take something away," I said. I waited to give it to her at the right time. And who decided that? He asked sharply. I did. He shook his head. That's control, he said. You're accusing me of controlling her, but you did the same thing. I considered that for a moment. Then I nodded. You're right, I said. That stopped him. He hadn't expected agreement. I made a decision for her. I continued. But I made it to give her freedom, not to limit it. Daniel's expression hardened again. You keep saying that, he said, but you don't know what our life is like. I didn't respond right away, because that was the part he didn't understand. I don't need to know everything, I said finally. I only need to know how she feels. And how does she feel? He challenged. I looked at him. You heard her, I said. She said she feels like she's disappearing. The words hung there, unavoidable. Daniel looked away for a moment. Just a moment, but it was enough. She's overwhelmed, he said finally. That's all. No, I replied. She's waking up. He turned back to me, anger flashing again. You don't get to define her experience, he said. I'm not defining it, I said. I'm listening to it. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Daniel's breathing slowed slightly, as if he was trying to regain control again. This doesn't change anything, he said after a moment. It might, I replied. No, he said firmly, because at the end of the day, she still has a life here, responsibilities, commitments. Yes, I said, she does, and she's not going to walk away from that because of a few documents. I didn't argue, because he was partly right. This wasn't simple. This wasn't immediate. Change like this never is. I don't expect her to walk away tonight, I said. He frowned. Then what do you expect? I thought about that for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I expect her to start asking herself what she really wants, I said. And if what she wants is exactly what we already have? He asked. Then nothing will change, I replied. The answer seemed to frustrate him even more, because it left the outcome in her hands. Not his, not mine, hers. You're very confident, he said. No, I said softly. I'm hopeful. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head again. You've planted doubt, he said, and doubt destroys things. I met his gaze. Sometimes, I said, but sometimes it reveals what was already broken. The words hit their mark. I could see it, the flicker of something beneath his anger. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. You should leave, he said suddenly. The shift was abrupt, but not unexpected. I nodded slowly. I was planning to, I said. I stood up carefully, smoothing my coat as I moved toward the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, just as I reached for my bag, he said something else. If she comes back, he said, well, fix this. I paused, not turning around immediately. Then I looked back at him. You can't fix something she hasn't decided is broken yet, I said, and with that, I left. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside sharp and clear. I pulled my coat tighter around me, taking a slow breath as I walked toward my car. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the door handle, not from fear, not from regret, but from the weight of what had just happened. Everything had changed. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, and as I stared out at the quiet street, one thought settled in my mind. The gift had been opened. The truth had been seen. And now, the choice was hers. Emily didn't go back home that night. I didn't know that immediately. At first, all I had was silence, the kind that stretches longer than it should, making you question every decision that led up to it. I drove home slowly, my mind replaying every moment from the evening, every word, every pause, every look on her face. Had I pushed too far? Had I waited too long? Or had I finally done exactly what needed to be done? By the time I reached my house, the sky had deepened into that quiet, late December darkness that always felt heavier than usual. I didn't turn on the television, didn't make tea. I just sat in the living room, my coat still on, staring at the faint reflection of the window glass, waiting. Not for a call, not for an explanation, just for something to tell me that she was okay. The phone finally rang just after midnight. My heart jumped before I even reached for it. Emily. I answered quickly. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then her voice, soft, tired, but clear. I'm not at home, she said. Relief and concern hit me at the same time. Where are you? I asked. I'm at Rachel's, she replied. That surprised me, not because it didn't make sense, but because it meant something deeper. Rachel wasn't just a safe place. She was a connection to a version of Emily that had been quiet for a long time. Are you okay? I asked gently. There was another pause. I don't know, she said honestly. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words settle. That's okay, I said. You don't have to know yet. She let out a soft breath. I didn't go back, she said. After I left, I just kept driving. I could picture it, the way she used to drive when she needed space. No destination, just movement. And then I asked. I ended up near Rachel's place, she said. I didn't even think about it. I just turned onto her street. That's not an accident, I said softly. She gave a small, almost fragile laugh. Maybe not, she admitted. Did you talk to her? I asked. Yes, she said, for hours. And Emily hesitated. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. She asked me one question, she said. What was it? She asked me, when was the last time I made a decision without explaining it to someone else first? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of realization. And what did you say? I asked. I couldn't answer, she admitted. I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see me. That tells you something, I said. Yes, she replied quietly. It does. There was a shift in her tone now. Subtle, but real. What are you thinking? I asked. I think she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think I've been living a life that looks right from the outside, but doesn't feel right on the inside. I let that sit. Because it mattered. It mattered more than anything else she could have said. And the documents, I asked. I brought them with me, she said. Rachel looked at them. And she confirmed everything Emily replied. She explained the structure, the shares, the protections you put in place. I exhaled slowly, not because I doubted it, but because hearing it out loud made it real for her too. She said it was one of the smartest setups she's ever seen, Emily added. I smiled faintly. That sounds like Rachel, I said. There was a brief pause. Then Emily's voice softened again. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked. The question carried less confusion now, more understanding. But it still deserved an honest answer. Because I didn't want it to influence your choices before you were ready, I said. And because I was afraid. Afraid of what? She asked. Afraid that if I gave it to you too early, I said it would become something someone else tried to control. The words landed quietly. But they landed. Emily didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. I think that's exactly what would have happened, she said. I didn't say anything, because she was the one who needed to reach that conclusion. Mom, she continued. He called me. My chest tightened again. What did he say? I asked. He said I was overreacting, she replied. That I needed to come home so we could fix this. Fix this. The same words he had used before. And how did that make you feel? I asked. She let out a slow breath, like I was being pulled back into something I don't fully understand anymore, she said. There it was. Clarity. Not complete, but growing. Did you go back? I asked. No, she said firmly. Not tonight. That was the first real decision, the first step. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know yet, she admitted, but I do know one thing. What's that? I'm not making any more decisions just to keep the peace, she said. The strength in her voice caught me off guard, not because it was loud, but because it was real. That's a good place to start, I said. There was a pause. Then she asked something I hadn't expected. Mom, do you think I've been wrong about everything? The question wasn't about facts. It was about identity. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. No, I said gently. I think you've been doing your best with what you knew at the time, and now she asked. Now I said you know more. She was quiet for a long moment. I feel like everything is shifting, she said. It is, I replied. And that's scary. Yes, I said. It is. Another pause. Then her voice softened again. But it also feels freeing, she admitted. I smiled to myself. That's because it is, I said. We stayed on the phone for a while longer, talking about small things. Simple things. Not heavy, not complicated, just reconnecting. And when we finally hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at the quiet room around me. The house felt different now. Not empty, not heavy, but hopeful. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't wondering if I had lost my daughter completely. I knew she was still there, finding her way back. And as I turned off the light and prepared to go to bed, one thought settled firmly in my mind. The gift had opened a door, but it was Emily who had chosen to walk through it. The next morning came slower than usual, not because the clock had changed, but because everything else had. I woke up before the sun had fully risen, the faint gray light slipping through the curtains like a quiet reminder that the world keeps moving, whether we are ready for it or not. For a moment, I stayed still in bed, listening to the silence of the house. No phone ringing, no sudden answers, just space. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel helpless inside that silence. I felt patient. Emily had taken a step, a real one, and now whatever came next had to come from her. I made coffee slowly that morning, letting the familiar rhythm ground me. Pour, wait, breathe. By the time I sat down at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed softly. A message from Emily. I didn't sleep much. Can we meet today? I stared at the screen for a moment, my chest tightening slightly. Not from worry this time, From something else. Hope. Yes, I typed back. Whenever you're ready. Her reply came quickly. 10 a.m. Rachel's office. Rachel's office. Not her home. Not mine. Neutral ground. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't retreating anymore. She was facing this. When I arrived, Rachel was already there. She greeted me with a quiet smile, one that carried both understanding and caution. She's in the conference room, Rachel said softly. She's been here since early. I nodded. Thank you, I replied. Rachel gave a small nod back. She's asking the right questions, she added. That matters. It did, more than anything. I walked down the short hallway, my footsteps slower than usual. Not hesitant, just aware. Because I knew this moment wasn't about convincing her of anything. It was about meeting her where she was. I opened the door gently. Emily was sitting at the table, the document spread out in front of her. Her hair was slightly undone, her eyes tired, but focused. She looked up when I stepped in. Hi, Mom, she said. Hi, I replied softly. I took the seat across from her, careful not to rush into anything. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Really looked. Not through assumptions, not through distance, just present. I've been going through everything she said, gesturing lightly to the papers. I figured, I said. She let out a small breath. I also called the attorney, she added, Howard Klein. That didn't surprise me. And I asked. He confirmed everything, she said. Every detail, every clause. I nodded slowly. And how does that make you feel? She leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes shifting for a moment as she searched for the right words. Overwhelmed, she admitted, but also clearer than I've felt in years. Clear. That word mattered. What feels clear? I asked. She hesitated. Then she said it. I've been living according to someone else's structure, she said. Not necessarily my own. I didn't interrupt. I let her continue. And I didn't even realize it, she added, because it didn't feel wrong at first. It felt supportive. That made sense. Control rarely starts as control. It starts as guidance. I trusted him, she said quietly. I know, I replied. And maybe I still do. In some ways, she continued. But I don't trust the way I've been showing up in my own life. That was the real realization. Not about Daniel, about herself. What does that mean to you? I asked gently. It means she paused, her fingers lightly brushing her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the documents. I don't know who I am without that structure anymore. The vulnerability in her voice hit me deeply. Because that's the hardest part, not leaving something, but figuring out who you are after. That's okay at edge of the documents, I don't know who I am without that structure anymore. The vulnerability in her voice hit me deeply. Because that's the hardest part, not leaving something, but figuring out who you are after. That's okay, I said softly. She looked up at me. It doesn't feel okay, she admitted. I know, I said, but it's still okay. She studied my face for a moment. Were you ever scared like this? She asked. I smiled faintly. Yes, I said, more times than I can count. And what did you do? I kept going, I replied. One step at a time. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I didn't want fear to decide for me. She nodded slowly. That makes sense, she said. There was a brief pause. Then she looked down at the documents again. This changes things, she said. Yes, I agreed. Not just financially, she added, but mentally. I leaned forward slightly. How so? She took a deep breath. For the first time, I feel like I have a choice that isn't influenced by anyone else's expectations, she said. There it was again. Choice. The very thing I had hoped she would see. And what do you want to do with that choice? I asked. She didn't answer right away, because this wasn't a question you answer quickly. I don't know yet, she said, but I know I need to figure it out on my own. I nodded. That's all you need to know right now. She looked at me carefully. Are you expecting me to leave him? She asked. The question was direct, but it deserved an honest answer. No, I said. Her expression shifted slightly, surprised. I'm not expecting you to do anything, I continued. I just want you to make whatever decision you make because it feels right to you. She studied me for a long moment. Even if I stay, she asked. Even if you stay, I said. That mattered, because this wasn't about pushing her in the opposite direction. It was about giving her control. She let out a slow breath. Daniel wants to meet today, she said. I didn't react immediately. How do you feel about that? I asked. I think I need to, she said, but not the way I used to. What do you mean? I mean, she said, sitting up a little straighter. I'm not going into that conversation to be guided. I'm going to ask questions, real ones. I felt a quiet sense of pride rise in my chest. That sounds like a good plan, I said. She nodded. Then after a moment, she added something else. If I had opened that box and just ignored it, she said, her voice soft, I think I would have stayed exactly the same. I held her gaze. But you didn't, I said. No, she replied. I didn't, and that made all the difference. Because sometimes the future doesn't come from what you're given. It comes from what you're willing to face. Emily chose a public place. That didn't surprise me. It wasn't fear that guided that decision. It was clarity. She wanted space, boundaries, a setting where emotions couldn't quietly close in around her. She told me later it was a small cafe just outside downtown. The kind with large windows, steady background noise, and enough people around to keep things grounded. Daniel arrived first. Of course he did. He always preferred to control the beginning of a conversation. Emily noticed that immediately. He was already seated, she told me afterward. Like he had rehearsed everything. That didn't surprise me either. But this time, she wasn't walking into the same conversation. She wasn't the same person. When she stepped inside, she didn't rush to him. Didn't apologize for being late. Didn't soften herself for being late. Didn't soften herself to make the moment easier. She simply walked over, set her bag down, and sat across from him. Hi, she said. Daniel smiled, that familiar, composed smile. He replied. I'm glad you came, to make the moment easier. She simply walked over, set her bag down, and sat across from him. Hi, she said. Daniel smiled, that familiar, composed smile. Hey, he replied. I'm glad you came. Emily nodded slightly. I said I would. There was no warmth in her voice, but there was no hostility either, just neutrality. And sometimes neutrality is more unsettling than anger. Do you want coffee? He asked. I already had some, she said. A small thing. But had some, she said. A small thing, but a clear signal. She wasn't there to settle into comfort. She was there for something else. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her. You didn't come home, he said. It wasn't an accusation, not directly, but it carried one. No clear signal. She wasn't there to settle into comfort. She was there for something else. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her. You didn't come home, he said. It wasn't an accusation, not directly, but it carried one. No, she replied calmly. Why? Emily met his gaze. Because I needed space, she said. Daniel nodded slowly as if he expected that answer. From me, he asked. From everything, she said. That answer didn't satisfy him. She could tell. So you went to Rachel, he said. Yes, and she helped you process all of this, he added. The way he said it made it sound like an external influence, like something outside of Emily's own thinking. She helped me understand the details, Emily said. The thinking was mine. Daniel's expression tightened slightly. That's not how it looks, he said. Emily didn't react. How does it look? She asked. It looks like you're being influenced, he said. First by your mother, now by Rachel. Emily leaned back slightly in her chair. And what if I am? She asked. Daniel blinked. Then you're not thinking clearly, he said. Emily tilted her head slightly. And when I've been following your guidance all these years, was that influence? She asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's different, he said. How? She pressed. Because I'm your partner, he replied. We build things together. Emily nodded slowly. I used to believe that, she said. The words landed heavier than anything she had said so far. Daniel leaned forward, his tone sharpening. You're acting like I've done something wrong, he said. I'm trying to understand if something has been wrong, she replied. That's not the same thing, he said. It feels the same to me, she answered. Silence settled between them, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable for Emily. It was necessary. Daniel exhaled, trying to reset. Okay, he said. Let's be practical. What exactly do you think this changes? Emily reached into her bag and pulled out the documents, placing them gently on the table. It changes my options, she said. Daniel glanced down at them briefly, then back at her. You always had options, he said. Emily shook her head slightly. I had choices that fit within a structure, she said. That's not the same as options. Daniel frowned. That sounds like semantics, he said. No, she replied calmly. It's perspective. He leaned back again, studying her more carefully now. You've changed, he said. Emily didn't deny it. Yes, she said. And you think this is a good thing? He asked. I think it's an honest thing, she replied. Daniel let out a breath, his patience thinning again. Emily, we've spent years building something together, he said. You can't just throw that away because of one conversation. I'm not throwing anything away, she said. Then what are you doing? She paused, then answered simply. I'm reevaluating. The word hung in the air. Daniel shook his head. You're destabilizing everything he said. No, she replied. I'm questioning everything. That leads to the same place, he snapped. Only if the foundation isn't strong, she said. That hit. Hard. Daniel's expression darkened. You're implying that our relationship is weak, he said. I'm asking if it's balanced, she replied. Another silence. Sharper this time. Daniel leaned forward again, lowering his voice. Let me ask you something, he said. If you didn't have that money, would we even be having this conversation? Emily didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. He stared at her. No, you wouldn't, he insisted. Because nothing would feel different. Emily shook her head slowly. It would still feel different, she said. I just wouldn't have the ability to act on it. That was the truth. And it landed exactly where it needed to. Daniel sat back, running his hand across his face. So this is about power, he said. Emily considered that, then nodded slightly. Yes, she said, but not in the way you think. He looked at her sharply. Then explain it. It's not about having power over you, she said. It's about finally having power over my own life. The words settled between them. Clear, unshakable. Daniel didn't respond clear. Unshakable. Daniel didn't respond right away, because there wasn't an easy way to argue with that. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be, he said finally. No, she replied. I've been making it simpler than it actually is. And right away, because there wasn't an easy way to argue with that. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be, he said finally. No, she replied. I've been making it simpler than it actually is. Another shift. Another moment where the ground beneath him moved. What do you want, Emily? He asked. The question came out quieter this time, less controlled, more real. Emily held his gaze. I want to feel like I'm choosing my life, she said. And you don't feel that now? He asked. She hesitated, then answered honestly, not completely. Daniel looked away for a moment. Just a moment, but it was enough to reveal something. Frustration, maybe even doubt. So what does that mean? He asked. It means I need time, she said. Time to figure out what's mine and what isn't. And where does that leave us? He pressed. Emily took a slow breath. It leaves us uncertain, she said. The word hit harder than any accusation. Because uncertainty is something control cannot easily survive. Daniel's voice tightened. I don't do well with uncertainty, he said. Emily nodded. I know, she replied. And you're okay with that? He asked. She held his gaze. For the first time? Yes, she said. And that was the moment everything changed again. Because she wasn't just questioning him anymore. She was choosing herself. Emily didn't come back to me right away after that meeting. And this time, I didn't expect her to. Because something important had changed. She wasn't running toward comfort anymore. She was walking toward truth. And truth takes time. 2 days passed. Then 3. I didn't call her. I didn't text her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew this part mattered. She needed space to hear her own voice clearly. On the 4th day, my phone rang. I knew it was her before I even looked at the screen. Hi, Mom, Emily said when I answered. Her voice sounded different. Not lighter, not heavier, just grounded. Hi, sweetheart, I replied. There was a small pause. I think I understand now, she said. I didn't rush to respond. Tell me, I said gently. She exhaled slowly. I went back home yesterday, she said. That made my chest tighten slightly. Not with fear, but with attention. And I asked. I didn't stay long, she continued, but I needed to see it with a different perspective. That made my chest tighten slightly, not with fear, but with attention. And I asked. I didn't stay long, she continued, but I needed to see it with a different perspective. That made sense. Sometimes you have to return to a place to realize how much it's changed, or how much you have. What did you see? I asked. She hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. I saw how small I've been making myself, she said. The words hit deep, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. In what way? I asked softly. In conversations, she said. In decisions. In the way I explain things, even the way I sit. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of her realization. Do you remember how I used to talk about ideas? She added. How excited I used to get. Yes, I said. I remember. I don't do that anymore, she said. No, I replied quietly. You don't. There was no accusation in my voice, just acknowledgement, and I didn't even notice when it stopped. She said, That's how it happens. Not all at once, but gradually. I talked to Daniel again, she continued. Talked to Daniel again, she continued. And my grip tightened slightly around the phone. How did that go? I asked. She let out a small breath. He tried to explain everything again, she said. Why things are the way they are. Why his approach makes sense. I grip tightened slightly around the phone. How did that go? I asked. She let out a small breath. He tried to explain everything again, she said. Why things are the way they are. Why his approach makes sense. And what did you think? I asked. I think he believes what he's saying, she replied. That surprised me slightly. Believes it? I repeated. Yes, she said. I don't think he sees it as control. That was an important distinction. Then, what is it? I asked. She paused, then said something that made everything clearer. I think he's comfortable being in control, she said. And there it was. Not manipulation as a strategy, but control as a habit. What did you say to him? I asked. I told him I needed space, she replied. And how did he react? He didn't like it, she said simply. I could imagine. What did he say? He said, space creates distance, she answered. And distance creates problems. I nodded to myself. That's one way to see it, I said. What do you think? She asked. I think space creates clarity, I replied, and clarity reveals truth. She was quiet for a moment. Yeah, she said. That's what it feels like. Another pause. Then she said something I hadn't been expecting yet. I opened your letter again, she said. The one inside the envelope, the part I had written by hand, and I asked softly. I read it 3 times, she said. My chest tightened. What stood out to you? I asked. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer. You said, this isn't something I'm giving you. It's something I've been holding for you until you were ready to hold it yourself. I swallowed slowly. Yes, I said. I didn't understand that before, she said. And now I do, she replied. The simplicity of her answer carried everything. What does it mean to you? I asked. It means you trusted me, she said. Yes, even when I wasn't trusting myself, she added. That part hit the deepest. Yes, I said again. She let out a small, emotional breath. I don't think I've felt that kind of trust in a long time, she admitted. I didn't respond immediately, because some moments don't need words. I've been thinking about what I want, she continued. And? I asked gently. I don't have all the answers, she said. But I know what I don't want anymore. That was enough. What don't you want? I asked. I don't want to feel like I need permission to exist in my own life, she said. The words were clear, firm, unshakable. And what does that mean for you moving forward? I asked. She hesitated. Then she said it. I told Daniel I'm taking a step back from the relationship, she said. I closed my eyes briefly. Not in shock, but in recognition. This was the turning point. How did he respond? I asked. He said I was making a mistake, she replied, that I was letting emotions ruin something stable. And what do you think? I asked. I think she paused, then continued. Stability without identity isn't really stability. I felt a quiet sense of pride rise in my chest. That's a powerful realization, I said. It doesn't feel powerful, she admitted. It feels scary. Yes, I said. It usually does. Another pause. Then her voice softened again. Mom, I'm sorry. That's a powerful realization. I said. It doesn't feel powerful, she admitted. It feels scary. Yes, I said. It usually does. Another pause. Then her voice softened again. Mom, I'm sorry, she said. I felt my breath catch slightly. For what I asked. For not seeing you, she said. For shutting you out. For believing things without questioning them. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You don't need to apologize for learning, I said. But I hurt you, she replied. Yes, I said gently. You did. The honesty mattered. But you're here now, I added, and that matters more. She was quiet for a moment. Do you think we can? But I hurt you, she replied. Yes, I said gently. You did. The honesty mattered. But you're here now, I added, and that matters more. She was quiet for a moment. Do you think we can fix things? She asked. I smiled softly. I don't think we need to fix them, I said. I think we just need to rebuild them. She let out a small breath. I'd like that, she said. So would I replied. And as we sat there connected, not by obligation, but by choice, I realized something. The gift had done more than open a door. It had given her something she hadn't had in a long time. Not just independence, not just opportunity, but herself. Emily didn't move out immediately. That's not how real change works. It doesn't happen in one dramatic moment where everything falls apart and rebuilds itself overnight. It happens in layers, in decisions that feel small at first but carry weight over time. The first thing she did was set boundaries, clear ones. Not emotional, not reactive, just firm. I need time, she told Daniel. Not maybe, not I think, just need. At first, he didn't take it seriously. He thought it was temporary, a phase, something that could be corrected with enough conversation, enough logic, enough persuasion. That had always worked before. But this time, it didn't. Emily stopped explaining herself. That was the first real shift. When Daniel asked where she was going, she didn't offer a full breakdown of her plans. When he questioned her decisions, she didn't immediately justify them. When he tried to steer the conversation, she didn't follow. She simply stayed where she was. And that unsettled him more than anything else ever had. Because control depends on response. And she had stopped responding the way he expected. I feel like you're shutting me out, he told her one evening. They were sitting in the same living room where everything had once looked perfect. Now it felt different, not broken, just honest. I'm not shutting you out, she said calmly. I'm just not letting myself disappear anymore. He stared at her. That's not what I've been asking you to do, he said. I know, she replied. But it's what I've been doing anyway. That truth was harder for him to accept than any accusation. Because it didn't blame him directly. It simply revealed the reality. What do you want from me? He asked. Emily thought about that for a moment. I want space to think without being guided, she said. And then what he pressed. I don't know yet, she admitted. That answer frustrated him, because uncertainty was something he couldn't manage, couldn't structure, couldn't control. "This isn't sustainable," he said. "Maybe not," she replied. "But neither was what we had before." The words landed quietly, but they stayed. Days passed, then a week. Emily spent more time outside the house, sometimes at Rachel's office, sometimes just walking, sometimes sitting in silence with her own thoughts. And slowly, something began to return. Her voice. Not the careful, measured version, but the one that asked questions without apologizing. The one that considered possibilities without filtering them through someone else's approval. She started revisiting old ideas, things she had once cared about, projects she had abandoned, dreams she had quietly set aside. One afternoon, she called me again. "I found my old notebooks," she said. I smiled softly. "The ones from college?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "The ones where I used to write everything down." "And I don't recognize that version of me," she admitted. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. She paused, then said something that made me smile even more. "No," she said. "I think I miss her. That was the beginning, not the end of something, but the return of something." Meanwhile, Daniel was trying to adjust, trying to regain balance. But the more Emily stepped into her own clarity, the more his usual patterns stopped working. "You're changing the rules," he told her one night. Emily shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm realizing there were rules I didn't agree to." That distinction mattered, because it shifted responsibility. Not onto him entirely, but back onto her. "I thought we were building something together," he said. "We were," she replied, "but I wasn't fully present in it." And now he asked. "Now I'm figuring out what I actually want to build," she said. He stared at her. "And what if it's not this?" he asked. Emily didn't answer right away, because that question carried consequences, real ones. Finally, she spoke. "Then we need to be honest about that," she said. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Daniel looked away, for the first time not out of frustration, but out of uncertainty, because control had always given him clarity. And now, that clarity was gone. A few days later, Emily made another decision. She moved out, not dramatically, not in anger, just intentionally. She packed a few things, the essentials, and she left. "I need to experience my life on my own terms," she told him. "And this is the only way I know how to do that right now." Daniel didn't argue, not because he agreed, but because he didn't know how anymore. She came to stay with me for a few days at first, just a few. But those days turned into something more. Not dependency, not regression, but reconnection. We didn't talk about everything all at once. We didn't try to fix the past. We simply shared space again. Morning coffee, quiet conversations, laughter that felt unfamiliar at first and then natural again. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "I used to think strength meant holding everything together," she said. "And now?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Now I think it means being willing to let things fall apart so you can see what's real." I nodded, because she had learned something it had taken me years to understand. And as I looked at her, not as the version she had been, but as the woman she was becoming, I realized something. The gift had done exactly what it was meant to do. Not give her a future. It wasn't a dramatic ending. No slammed doors. No final arguments filled with words meant to wound. That's not how it ended. It ended quietly. and somehow that made it even more powerful. Emily stayed with me for 2 weeks, not because she needed to be taken care of, but because she needed a place where she could hear herself think. And slowly, day by day, I watched her become someone more certain. Not certain about everything, but certain about herself. She started making small decisions again. What to eat, where to go, how to spend her time. Simple things, but each one carried something bigger beneath it. Ownership. One morning, she came into the kitchen earlier than usual. I was already there pouring coffee. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed lightly, watching me for a moment before speaking. "I signed the papers," she said. I turned to look at her. "What papers?" I asked, even though I had a feeling I knew. "The ones to officially separate our finances," she said. I nodded slowly. "That's a big step," I said. "Yes," she replied. Her voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't uncertain. It was steady. "I didn't do it out of anger," she added. "I did it because it felt necessary." "That's the right reason," I said. She gave a small nod. "I also met with Howard again," she continued. "We talked about how I want to manage things moving forward." "And what did you decide?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "I want to build something of my own," she said. My heart warmed at that. "What kind of something?" I asked. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "But I know I want it to reflect me, not just fit into something someone else designed." I nodded. "That's a good place to start." She stepped closer to the table, wrapping her hands around a mug. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm reacting," she said. "I feel like I'm choosing." There it was again. Choice. The word that had changed everything. "What about Daniel?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't know, but because she wanted to say it carefully. "We talked," she said finally. "And?" He asked me if this was permanent, she replied. My chest tightened slightly. "What did you tell him?" She met my eyes. I told him, "I don't know what permanent looks like yet." That was honest. Painfully honest. "And how did he take that?" I asked. "He didn't like it," she said. "But he listened. That mattered. More than anything. He said he wants to try again," she added. I nodded slowly. "And do you?" Emily looked down at her coffee for a moment, then back at me. "I think if anything continues between us, it has to be completely different," she said. "In what way?" I asked. "In a way where I don't lose myself," she replied. Her voice didn't waver. "And if that's not possible?" I asked. She didn't hesitate this time. "Then it's not something I can go back to." The clarity in her answer told me everything. She wasn't unsure anymore. Not about what she needed, only about how things would unfold. And that was enough. A few days later, she returned to her apartment. Not the one she had shared with Daniel. A new one. Smaller. Simpler. But hers. I helped her unpack. We didn't rush. We didn't try to fill the space all at once. We let it breathe. Let it become something gradually. At one point, she stood in the middle of the living room, looking around at the bare walls. "It's quiet," she said. "Yes," I replied. She smiled softly. "I like it." That moment stayed with me, because it wasn't about the apartment. It was about what it represented. It was about what it represented. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from everything being real. Before I left that day, she walked me to the door. "Mom," she said. I turned back to her. "Yeah." She hesitated for just a second. Then she stepped forward and hugged me, tightly. Not out of need, but out of connection. Thank you, she said softly. For what I asked. For not forcing me, she replied. For trusting me to figure it out. I smiled, holding her a little longer. I always trusted you, I said. She pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting mine. I know, she said, and now I trust myself too. That was the moment I had been waiting for. Not for her to choose a path. Not for her to prove anything. But for her to believe in her own voice again. As I walked to my car, I looked back once. She was still standing in the doorway, not unsure, not lost, just present. And I realized something. The Christmas gift she had refused that night, it had never been about money. It had never been about security. It had been about timing. Because a key only matters when you're ready to open the door. And now she finally was. The most important lessons in life rarely come wrapped in perfect moments. They come through discomfort, through confusion, through the quiet realization that something inside you has been missing and the courage to go looking for it. What Felicia gave her daughter was never just a financial gift. It was trust. The kind of trust that says, I believe you will find your way, even if it takes time. And what Emily discovered wasn't just independence, it was identity. She learned that stability without self-awareness can feel like safety, but it can also quietly take pieces of you away. She learned that love should never require you to shrink. And most importantly, she learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. If you've ever felt like you were living a life that didn't fully belong to you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? What would you do if you were given a second chance to choose your own path? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes the stories we tell each other are the keys that help us unlock our own.